Hello everyone, this is going to be a follow-up video to my most recent YouTube video where I talked about my thoughts on the unveiling of the Tekken store for Tekken 8. It was revealed during the recent Tekken Talk roadmap panel. A very unique video of mine in terms of response. I've been making content on Tekken for many years and I've made videos calling out what I believe to be scumbaggy or underhanded business practices by its publisher before, but I've never really seen a response quite like this. For a video that has something like 25 or 26,000 views as of the recording of this, it has around 1,000 comments, which is really quite a lot, and I've read every single one of them. That sort of thing is important and interesting to me. And something that you realize as you're reading the comments is that it is a very divisive topic and something that people have very, very passionate views on. I've had, the entire spectrum from people, threatening to attack my channel and reporting me for spreading lies and misinformation on the one side, to people who have subscribed and started following my content specifically because they agreed with me. So, people coming down on both sides of the fence and a wide spectrum of beliefs when it comes to this. Now, the reason I'm doing a follow-up video here is not because I want to dunk on some of the comments that I had that I don't agree with or make fun of people. It genuinely is because I want to clarify my viewpoint a little bit better. And it's like a paper at school. If you want it to be good, you have to focus on a really small topic. There are so many things we could talk about here, to what's happening in the video game industry at large, to what is happening or not happening on the content creation side of Tekken. But I want to talk about the most common counter argument that I saw in my own comments, which was this thing of, well, you don't have to buy, just don't interact with the store and it doesn't affect you. It was a very common response that I got. I have some examples and variations of that up on the screen right now, but it was all over the comment section, right? And I think that specific counter argument sort of betrays a misunderstanding of the point that I was trying to make. It shows that you're probably not understanding why a lot of people are upset about this sort of thing, because we obviously know that we don't have to buy things with our money. And so I just want to, maybe I expressed myself poorly, maybe people reacted, kind of viscerally to the thumbnail and the title of that video. We're all guilty of that sort of thing on YouTube all the time, but maybe I can sort of explain my viewpoint a little bit better and we can understand each other better. I think that would be a very useful and good thing for the culture and community surrounding Tekken. So let's talk about this specific topic of, well, you don't have to buy, because it's something you see a lot. Now, I think the essence of that argument is basically this. Well, if you don't like a microtransaction store and you don't want to spend your money in it, just keep playing the game the way you are right now. It doesn't subtract anything from your experience, and then the people who don't mind this sort of thing, who really like the legacy costumes and are happy to pay the price for those costumes, can spend their money the way they like and get the things that they want, and it's not a problem, right? So it sort of seems to make sense as an argument, right? Well, first of all, I don't think people who are upset about the store are upset about that, the fact that it exists at all, but more the way in which it was launched and created. And then I would also want to make the argument in this video that even if I never interact with the store at all, it will still affect me in my experience in a big way. And it is also, even though you should be careful about slippery slope arguments, there are so many examples and so much strong indication that this is something that is a worsening problem for video games in the industry, that it is something that it does make sense to be concerned about, even if you're not being cynical or pessimistic about it. Well, the first point that I want to make, right, is that I would have been happy with this game having a store. Not happy about it, but I wouldn't have minded it nearly as much if we knew that there was going to be a store in Tekken 8 when the game was initially advertised or initially released. If they had said there was going to be a microtransaction store in this game and even been as transparent and good at communicating as to say, we understand that the competitive aspect of a fighting game is huge and that this is multiplayer, online, and competitive. So there will be a store. It will contain, cosmetics, downloadable characters. We are not planning to put any sort of gambling mechanic in the game or allowing players to pay for power. Then that would have made a lot of sense to me. And this whole argument of we need to do this to continue to make money to support the game would have made a lot more sense in that sort of context. The fact that the game is released, has an initial wave of success, people write very positive reviews about it, and then the store is suddenly revealed after the fact, when that initial sort of sales boom has already happened and most of the reviews are in. That is, I think, no matter how you twist it, deception on the part of Namco. You know, it's the equivalent of actual lying, and it sort of destroys the ability of some consumers to vote with their wallet. You know, you see this argument all the time. You should just vote with your wallet. If you don't like the store, don't spend any money in it. Well, a lot of people out there are so upset about the industry trend of the in-game microtransaction store that they genuinely do not want to buy or support a game that has a store like that. And by doing it this way, Namco has actually robbed those consumers of the ability to vote with their wallet, because they've looked at Tekken 8 and seen, oh, it's going to launch with no store, and then there will be DLC characters, you know. There was a roadmap for that, you know, 4 times this year, and I can buy or not buy those characters if I want to. Cool, I'm going to buy this game. I'm going to spend my $70 or even more if they buy a special edition. But the fact that the store shows up shortly after that means that these people have sort of been forced to support a game that ultimately has microtransactions, even though they might not want to. And that is, I think, straight up deception and malicious, and you could even, you know, start discussing the straight up legality of that sort of thing. And that's not something that I'm going to go into, because that gets very dicey, but there are many arguments you could make from a consumer law point of view that thing is not completely okay. But even if you don't go into that, I mean, just basic ethics, I think it's wrong. And then the next thing I want to talk about is this fact that the game and its shape will definitely be affected by the fact that it is designed to have in-game purchases in the store throughout its lifespan, right? If you're creating a game and it's going to have all this content that you're making, but your long-term plan is to gate community behind a paywall, because companies and publishers and developers, they plan these things years in advance, you know, and they start working on content that won't be released for months or years far in advance. So they're obviously going to plan out what content they are going to want to gate behind paywalls before release. So you have cosmetics and customization. Okay, this is how much we will put in the initial store, and then these cosmetics and these other things are the ones that we are going to release gradually later for money, and they might already be prepared and created. I mean, the next DLC characters for the next year might already be created for, as far as we know, you know, it's likely, because it's the sort of thing that these developers do. And so when it's planned that way, the nuance, right, is you release a game and you try and make it as complete and good as possible. It sees a huge commercial success, and you decide that it is viable for us with the money that we've made to develop additional content and then sell that in the future and add it to the game. That is one thing, but planning out and creating content in advance that you are withholding on initial release so that you can sell it later is a very different thing. And if you believe that sort of thing goes on, and I think it transparently, obviously does, then even if you never enter the Tekken store or spend any money in it, the game that you've purchased for your $70 has had its shape altered to some extent by the fact that the game has that shape. And that is why it is even more important that we are informed that it's going to take that shape before we spend our initial money, right? So really the deception and the delay of the store reveal is really the most dirty thing that they did, and I think probably the thing that made people the most upset. I think most of us, I am definitely aware of the fact that I don't have to spend any money in it, and that's not why I'm upset. I don't want these cosmetics, but am upset that I have to spend $4 to get them. I was probably never going to spend any money on any additional content in this game unless it was a specific DLC character that I've played and loved in the past. That's like the one exception I would make. The release of Miguel, I would want to buy Miguel and enjoy him in the game with, my viewers. So it's not that I don't have the money or that I want access to cosmetics, but I just want them for free because I don't want to have to spend money on them. It's the fact that even if I don't interact with the store, the shape of the game has been altered, and the fact that the store was revealed after the fact, which is, no matter how you twist it, a method of manipulating critical feedback and manipulating the consumer viewpoint of the product on initial release, right? Now, the third major argument that I wanted to make and that I talked a lot about in that previous video was this issue of the priorities of the publisher, right? It felt wrong to many, many of us that we are playing this game every day and it has these pretty huge problems, even though I agree that it is one of the best looking video games I've ever played. It's fun, you know, it's got cool looking characters and animations and stages, and the game systems are, to an extent at least, very, very interesting, you know, and it has a lot of functionality. And even though I don't go into story mode or play Tekken Ball, you know, it's cool that those things exist. I sort of agree with all of that. It's obvious that you have very spirited and passionate artists working on creating this product, and I don't deny that fact at all. The problem is, if I am focused mainly on competitive online play and it has such severe issues with cheating not being prevented, I mean, no single countermeasure existing to prevent that at all, or even inform people about that somebody might be a cheater before you accept a match, I would consider that a fault with the product. And when you buy something, and people like to make analogies to other products, you know, a meal in a restaurant or something else that you buy, I don't know, say that you buy a coffee maker from a manufacturer that has been advertised for many months as being like the new top of the line thing. It's being sold for what is considered a full price for a product of that type, and you go and you buy it when it's new and it's released, and you bring it home, and it has all these great features, but some of the very, very basic things that it is supposed to be able to do are not functioning. I don't know, maybe it has a cleaning function, which would be a good analogy for getting rid of cheaters, that just doesn't work. And so while I can use my coffee maker, I'm having these problems with it, and it's not functioning the way it should. You know, it's not a complete functioning product right now. And then you want the manufacturer of that product to talk about that and address that, because it's obviously their responsibility to do something about that. It really is. And they say, well, something will be happening with that in the future, and we will talk about it. But for now, look at this action figure we want to sell you. And they show you all of this other merchandise and these new products that you can buy, and then talk about additional things that you can add to the coffee maker or whatever that you didn't know about previously that will make it even better. You thought you already bought the top of the line, you know, good machine, but now there's this other stuff coming out that they had planned but didn't tell you about. It feels like they are prioritizing aggressive monetization and new ways of making money off of their consumer. But I think basic decency as somebody selling a product directly to consumers is to make sure that the base product is functioning properly before you start advertising additional merchandise or peripheries for it, right? So the fact that the disconnect counter, which shows up on screen but is always 0 right now, it's a feature of the game that was in the base product but just doesn't function. I think if you're going to do like an hour-long panel talking about the roadmap of the game and where we are right now, I would, as a gesture of decency, prioritize explaining what is being done about that before I started advertising Xiaoyu action figures, t-shirts, soundtracks, additional content, and a complete new in-game store that will have all kinds of monetized content that you can buy in addition to what you already have. It's like, forget about the fact that you already bought this base product, look at all this other stuff. So it's an issue of them seemingly prioritizing in a very, very strange way, and that puts people, off the game and the tone of voice they're being spoken to in a very big way. One comment I had was, what makes you think you're so entitled here? This guy was, apparently, he said he was quoting the main man. Apparently he had said this. I haven't heard main man say this, so I'm not going to attribute it to him. But he was like, to quote the main man, what makes you so entitled? What makes you think you're so entitled here? And it surprised me, because the argument I would make is, in this case, the reason some of us are acting entitled is because in this case, we are entitled. When you buy a product from somebody, openly criticizing that and critiquing it in any way you wish is definitely your right, and something that you should be doing if you want to. And if you are sold a product that isn't functioning properly, then demanding an answer or criticizing the manufacturer for that, or even demanding compensation, is actually something that you are completely entitled to. That's just how it works. It's I mean, people said you obviously don't know how a company works, you don't know anything about economics and finance. I'm not an expert on those things, but I did actually study them academically. I have a degree in economics and I have studied consumer law, and I can tell you for a fact that that is basic consumer law in basically every functioning democracy in the world. It's just how it works. And so it made me a little bit scared and worried to realize that I think specifically this younger generation of gamers don't know that, and think that they somehow have to be grateful or show continued financial support for companies, as some sort of sign of gratitude for the fact that they have this product on the market. My argument would be that you have already bought it and you own it now. That is how you've supported it. But that gives you certain basic rights with regards to that product, and it's not okay to trick people. So yeah, that would be my answer on that thing of entitlement. You are entitled to say what you think about this product, and you are entitled to demand that it function properly as advertised. That's just how it works. And you could make an analogy to any other product that you consume commercially in the world, really. So hopefully I've clarified my viewpoint a little bit more, and we understand each other a little bit more after that. I do not think that you are a bad person if you think that the legacy costume that Jin had in Tekken 4 is really cool and you don't mind buying it for $4. My point is, we are upset for all of these other reasons that are a little bit more complex and nuanced. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is, I want to talk a little bit about this industry trend and why it makes people sad and really quite worried, because you can go into a lot of different game franchises that have been very successful and very loved, and over the last decade or even longer, you could go back to decades, see this sort of thing, the microtransaction gradually creeping into the basic structure of that game. It usually starts off with minor things like cosmetics. You know, a lot of it started off with that infamous horse armor for Skyrim, right? And even back then, you see arguments being made for this not being a problem because it is purely cosmetic and it is completely voluntary. You don't have to buy it if you don't want to. But we also see that if those in-game products are successful, then it's the whole voting with the wallet thing. The developers are incentivized to create more of those products and to create more and more content that can be gated behind a paywall. And what happens to a lot of franchises, and where we end up eventually, is where the financial incentive of the developer or the publisher of the game is actually to deliver as little content as possible and leave as much content aside as possible for additional monetization after the fact. They can release a free game and then have all this additional content that you can buy, or they can sell a full game but try and have it be as bare bones as possible and get away with that, and then add all this additional content. And where that ends you up is with games that tend to not have a long time survivability and viability and passionate long-time communities supporting them, and games where the quality of the gameplay is really, really compromised with. And so when you're playing something that is as precise and competitive and difficult as Tekken, the integrity of the competitive part is so important that it's dangerous, very, very dangerous for a fighting game to head in that direction. I know slippery slope arguments aren't fantastic, but in this case, we have all this evidence of this happening all over the industry, and it does make sense to be worried about it. And that is why some people say, well, I don't want to support that trend, so I will vote with my wallet. I will choose not to buy a game that has it. And then Namco trick us in this way into consuming the product anyway, which is obviously very problematic. And we see price hikes, you know. In Call of Duty, you had skins initially for guns that were $2, and these days I think they go for $24, $25. You know, it just keeps going up and up and up. And because it is hugely successful and incentivized, it becomes more prevalent, right? So it is something that I think everybody should be worried about. If you think it's paranoia, then fair enough. We don't, share a viewpoint on that. I will say a final word here on DLC characters. Some people said that, well, if you look at Tekken 8, it's advertised as having in-game purchases, so they didn't lie about the store. And that's almost a willful like misunderstanding. Obviously, people thought that the end game purchases were going to be DLC characters and not an in-game store where you buy cosmetics for $4 a piece, which I still believe is a very high price when you could buy a whole character with like 3 or 4 native costumes for $6 in the previous game, right? But it's the price is not the issue at all. It could be $1, it could be $0.1. It would still be problematic structurally. Well, we know for a fact that Namco liked to release DLC characters very powerful and then nerf them after the fact. And that is not my conspiracy theory. There's hard evidence for that. If you look at the last 4 or 5 DLC characters released in a Tekken game, which was in Tekken 7, every single character has been severely nerfed ever released. We haven't had a single example of a character being released with the intention of having them be fun but as balanced as possible, and then the developers realizing that this character is too weak and then actually increasing their power in any way. They've actually been nerfed not once but multiple times each because they're just way too powerful at launch. And then they sell really well because of that, because people like winning and they like playing powerful characters. Again, we're voting with our wallets, and we are actually heavily incentivizing them to use this model of releasing an easy-to-play, very powerful DLC character that everybody buys and then nerfing them after the fact. It's also true that they're now putting Eddie as the default character that shows up on your main menu screen, effectively turning the main menu screen of the entire game into an advertisement, which feels really weird. I know they've said that they're going to let you change that to the character of your choice at some point, but they said they might do that, or that could be something that shows up in the future, but it was definitely no promise. For now, it's going to be the latest DLC character. So, they're pushing these characters. They come out very powerful, and even if you don't mind that, and even if you just really are excited about the idea of buying Eddie, you're actually being screwed over by that model as well, because you're now going to buy a character that has these strengths and these properties, and then down the line they're going to have to nerf that character heavily, and you now are sitting there with an inferior altered product. And it's really weird. You don't buy again a coffee maker that has all these functions, and then a couple of weeks down the line the manufacturer comes to your house and just removes some of the parts and makes it worse somehow and then walks away. I mean, if they said that, oh, this was a design fault, this is something that we tried to get right but failed to, and we're doing a modification after the fact, that's one thing. But when we know for a fact that they release DLC characters with the intention of nerfing them later, it becomes very problematic and very, very unethical. And I can prove that they think this way. It's an example that I like to bring up, but there was a leaked document from Bandai Namco. If you haven't heard about this, please look it up because it is very, very important. There was a leaked document from Bandai Namco around the release of Leroy, who was the big and obvious start of that entire trend, and a very precarious time for the Tekken franchise, both on and offline, where the character had not been released into the game yet, so you couldn't play and purchase him yet. But a few days or a day before he was released, there was a list of nerfs for Leroy at Namco. So they actually had prepared the nerfs that they were going to implement for the DLC character before he had been released, which means that they definitely, without the shadow of any doubt, intentionally released DLC characters too strong, which severely impacts the balance of the game. And balance is obviously very important. Balance is the ability for everybody to play what they love and have as much fun as possible when they're playing online. And so this additional monetization after the fact is impacting the balance of the game, is impacting the structure of the game, is impacting the future of the franchise. And for those reasons, it definitely affects me and everybody else who doesn't want to use the store, even though we will elect to not use it or not buy it. The fact that many people will, the fact that it will see a large amount of commercial success will affect everybody, and that is why a lot of people were very upset about this. I hope I clarified some of those arguments. I hope it makes a little bit more sense now. If I've misunderstood you somehow, please feel free to clarify your viewpoints in the comments. And like I say, I read all those comments. I promise to do it for this video as well. And I just hope that we can, like I say, understand each other a little bit better. It doesn't need to be this divisive. I don't think my video was unnecessary, pessimistic, cynical, inflammatory, or attacking anybody, really. But maybe you disagree. In either case, thank you so much for all the support that this channel has been shown lately. If I'm going to just mention some quick stats on that video, even though I had a lot of backlash on it, the vast majority of the feedback was actually positive. Something like 85% of reactions on it have been positive, and likes. So, you know, that's very cool. I mean, I'm not the only person who feels like this, which feels validating and kind of nice. But at the same time, I have more people showing up to my streams now. We're playing this new game. We're having a lot of fun with it. I'm having a lot of fun with it despite its flaws and despite my flaws. But thank you so very much. I do make this content and I try to be serious about doing that from a point of humility. But when I feel like me and the rest of this community are being exploited or talked down to or deceived in some way by the corporation that publishes the game, and then they say, well, you know, the numbers are what they are, they don't show us the numbers, you know, we don't have any transparency and we're just supposed to take their word for that, that sort of thing upsets me. And then I do feel that it makes sense to react in the way that I did. But this outro has been too long already. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys again very soon.